He's beginning to believe. Welcome to Primary Technology, the show about the tech news that matters. Massive week. We have all the Apple news. We're going to get into the details of the iPhone 17e, iPad Air, M5 MacBook Air, all the M5 stuff, Pro Display XDR. Yeah, I bought one. And the MacBook Neo. Plus, nothing had an event with the 4A Pro, new headphones. Claude is still trying to work with the Pentagon to be the AI for the Department of Defense. Netflix is out of the running, and Paramount is in for acquiring Warner Brothers Discovery. AI art can't be copyrighted, and a ton more. This episode is brought to you by Quo and Anthropic, and of course, all of you, the members who support us directly. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Robles, joined by my friend Jason Ayton. How's it going, Jason?
It's good. I explained to you earlier that it's tough because I have to solo parent for the next couple of days, a thing I've not had to do the entire time I've been married, and it's stressing me out a little bit. I was like genuinely worried I'd forget to feed my children. All of them are teenagers. They'll be fine. Friends.
I was going to say they'll be fine. You're not going to be bean dad.
Good.
I mean, it's been 17 years. I feel like your wife finally needs a break. Right?
That's true. She has never, we've been married for 18 years actually. She has never traveled without me in that time.
Yeah, well, be careful because now that she has, she might just do it all the time. I don't know.
It's possible.
Just kidding. Do you know where that quote is from? I might have used it before, but he's beginning to believe.
You know, the funny thing about, well, when you say it like that, it becomes more obvious because my first thought was the Polar Express, but I mean,
Santa
come
Claus.
on. It's like the whole believe thing.
Sure.
But I think that it is, what's his name? The
Yes.
Lawrence Fishburne.
That's correct.
Talking about, Neo.
Exactly.
Hence
that's
the,
right.
Matrix. The Matrix. The original
The Matrix,
one, right?
that's
It's
right.
the original.
1999, the original Matrix. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. The Neo, we're gonna talk about the Neo. We'll get to that. We'll get to all the things. We didn't have any 5-star reviews this week, which is frankly an affront to my existence. So please, leave us a 5-star rating and review. Let us know what you think of the name MacBook Neo. You can put that in your 5-star rating and review wherever you are. But we did have several listeners tell us where they consume primary technology, which is super fun. And so I just want to share these 2 quick pictures. This was Scott via email, listening to primary technology on his MagSafe charger. I want to know what arm that MagSafe car charger is on because that is holding the iPhone like a full foot away, it seems like, from the air conditioning vents. That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's
says,
pretty cool.
The note says it's a RAM mount. I don't know what that means.
A RAM mount screwed to the center area. Okay, that's the real deal. That's right.
That's tinkering right there, Steven.
That's tinkering to the max. Love that. I also love the rubber duck on the dash. That's how you do it. And then this one, it doesn't look like they're listening to primary technology, but this was from Alexandros in the UK. He was washing windows, listening to primary tech over in the United Kingdom. I thought, I've actually been to England. Have you ever been to England, Jason?
I have not.
I did. I used to work for a tour company, and so I was there, and I actually visited the rectory of John Wesley. And I thought this building was actually the rectory, but it is not. I emailed Alexandros back and forth, but he was listening to us while washing windows, which is really cool. He's also excited for the privacy display on the S26 Ultra, which I know you poo-pooed that, but I'm excited about it too.
I don't think I poo-pooed it, did I?
You said it's not a thing, it's not a big deal or whatever.
No, I think what I said is I thought what I said was that Apple should do that, but that I wasn't sure if I don't know what I said.
Oh, you thought people's habits, like, people should just change their habits rather than the privacy display.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I actually think the technology is very cool. I think it'd be wonderful to have. But also, if you're in situations regularly where you need that on your phone,
sure.
Maybe just don't hold your phone up in the air at the concert while you type in your passcode. That's what I was
But also think about, listen, we're not in the corporate world anymore, but I used to work in a place where I had a lot of meetings. And there would be a lot of people, and we would sit either in rows or in circles. And obviously you can't be on your phone the whole time in the meeting, but the times when I would be on my phone, that privacy display probably would have been nice. And you could activate it by location. And anyway, I got a Galaxy S26 Ultra coming next week, so I'm going to try it.
Steven, you can speak for yourself when you say that we're no longer in the corporate world because I have Microsoft Authenticator on my second home screen,
right.
And I use it 15 times a day.
That is right. That is horrible. That is, yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, we have a ton of news we got to get to. Let's get into it. I have my YouTube title A/B test results that I want to share with you as well because you said I had a bad title, and YouTube agreed because it did not win. It did not win the test. But Apple had 3 days of announcements this week. I have a video. Jason has several articles. We'll put all of those in the show notes. I had a video showing everything they announced except for the MacBook Neo because that came out the day after I made this video. But then I have a whole video on the Neo. But let's go one by one. The quickest things first. iPhone 17e. That was dropped on Monday. It now has MagSafe, which the 16E did not. It has better portrait photography because it will recognize dogs, cats, as well as people, automatically saves depth information. New C1X cellular chip, still the same price at $599 for double the storage, Jason. Can you believe that in 2026, Apple might double the storage and keep the price the same? I'm goading Jason because
I mean, they've done it a couple times. They've done
Jason's going to go off in a little bit about pricing.
But I mean, they've also done this before on other, like they retroactively doubled the RAM on the M3 and M2 MacBook Airs that they were still selling. So like, yeah.
I know they've done this with the iPhone lineup.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
the base storage just keeps going up. So anyway, that's the iPhone 17e. I feel like maybe 2 of our listeners might be getting this, but hey, it's a good phone. It's a good phone.
It's fine. I mean, this is the SE, right? This is the phone that fits that place. And I don't think anybody has ever argued that the 16E and the 17E are not substantially better than the SEs were.
100%. And they did add one color, soft pink. So that's it. That's
amazing.
That's the 17E. That's the whole thing. They also announced the M4 iPad Air the same day, right? It was iPad Air and 17E on
That's
Monday.
correct. Yeah.
The iPad Air, again, an updated chip. You know, it's going from the M3 to the M4. Hardware is relatively the same, but it does get the new N1 connectivity chip, which means it now has Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6. For everyone who says no one has Wi-Fi 7, sure. Better that it has 7 though and not. You know what I mean? For future proofing, and if people own iPads for literally a decade, and so it's great that it has Wi-Fi 7 now. And Jason, for the same price, same starting price, you now get 12 gigs of unified memory as opposed to 8. Isn't that amazing that they actually increased the memory and kept the price the same?
Did they say that somewhere?
They actually do say the 12 GBs here in the press release. It says unified memory jumps 50% to 12 gigabytes and memory bandwidth increases.
That's interesting for reasons I can't really talk about, but that's interesting.
Well,
that is actually, it's interesting to me that it is specifically articulated there, because
right.
There were other contexts where it felt like they were very careful not to specifically articulate that.
Well, Apple, for the iPad lineup, never talked about unified memory or RAM before like the last couple years. And I think the only reason why they're doing it now is because they keep framing it with the AI stuff.
Yeah.
That's the main, I think, driver. If the AI wasn't a part of the story, you would never hear about the memory stuff.
What's weird about it, though, is it has an M4, and the M4, every other M4 device started with 16 gigs of memory.
Is that true? The iPad M4? I don't think that had 16 gigs.
The iPad Pro, you're saying?
The iPad Pro.
Okay, I don't know about that. That may be true, but I just got like...
You had to get the 1 terabyte to get the 16 gigs of unified memory.
Okay, but none of them had 12. Let's just say that much. And I've always thought that these things were soldered on there and came like as a package, and that was one of the reasons why the Neo gets 8, because the iPhone had 8. Like the 18 Pro chip has 8 soldered. So it just seemed like a weird number. It's like they went through the effort of incrementing that to 12. The laptop versions all have at least 16. The iPad Pro, I have no idea. I'd have to look because.
Well, let me tell you, it appears as though the M4 iPad Pro did have 12.
Okay.
It had 12 gigs of RAM. And so this is also something it didn't used to be on the specs or comparison sheet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Apple typically with the iPads didn't want to talk about it. And the impression I got was they're like, we think customers will be really happy.
I'm sorry. The Google AI overview was wrong. Apple Tech Specs page is actually right.
I hope so.
Share my screen. So this is the proof. This is the comparison page with the M4 iPad Pros and the M5. The M4 base model had 8 gigs. If you upgrade to the 1 or 2 terabytes, it had 16. Whereas the new M5 iPad Pro and the new iPad Air comes with 12.
So that is weird because now we have a new configuration. So really,
An
Apple
M4
could do whatever
with 12
they
gigs.
wanted.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because in the tech specs and compare sheet, they call it RAM, but everywhere else they call it unified memory. I don't know if it's just to save characters, but
I always get confused about that, Stephen, when I'm writing about it. In fact, I was really careful in the article I wrote to be like, just talk about memory everywhere. Because like Apple, I didn't think they called it RAM.
Yeah. So there also has the C1X chip. So the faster cellular, which I did test in my iPad Pro video earlier. Well, no, it was last year now. And that C1X chip does make a difference if speed is the name of the game. And then it has the N1 chip as well for Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6. So yeah, nice upgrade to the M4 iPad Air. And the question is, should you upgrade year over year? 9 times out of 10 with all these products, no.
That is not a question. The iPad Air, nobody who has an iPad Air asked that, Stephen.
Probably not. But people in the comments, they'll be like, should I upgrade?
People buy iPad Airs and keep them for 6 years.
Right. Anyway.
As you should.
Yeah. Right. And the iPad Air, it's a great machine. It's nice to just see them keep updating it. And it's weird to think, like, I was using the M4 iPad Pro until just, 6 or 7 months ago when I had upgraded to the M5 iPad Pro because of the review unit. And I'm like, now it's the iPad Air. It's like the same chip. It's like the same. I'm going to do some side-to-sides, and I want to see, like, M4 iPad Pro, M4 iPad Air. Same performance? I imagine it would be. Anyway,
it should be. I mean,
we'll test. I'm going to test. I would think so. All right, so that was the M4 iPad Air. That's cool. M5 MacBook Air also came out. Good update for that. This is when prices start changing, Jason, though. The M5 MacBook Air, it got more expensive. I'm just continually goading Jason because in the pre-show, Jason was literally yelling about pricing, shouting.
I mean, I've been doing that for days now, actually.
Yes.
I have the two things that I've realized. I am officially now the Threads
You're the troll
depot for two very specific things. Why doesn't the MacBook Neo exist? And did Apple raise or lower prices? Because apparently it's confusing to a lot of people.
Yes.
Should we get into it? You tell me when it's okay for me to get into
Jason
this.
is the Pied Piper of trolls.
I was literally accused of being on Apple's payroll by none other than Mark Gurman.
Okay, let's talk about that in a second. We'll just say the MacBook Air, same colors as the last time. We didn't get any new colors, although colors for the MacBook Air is, that word color is doing a lot of work. You still got the sky blue, midnight, all that. N1 chip now, so it does have the Wi-Fi 7 and the Bluetooth 6. Higher base storage. It now starts at 512 gigabyte SSD. It does increase in price. Let me say this. The M4 MacBook Air, you could have bought at $999, and it came with 256 gigs of storage. Now the M5 starts at 512 gigs of storage, and the starting price is $1099. Other than that, it's great. The MacBook Air is such an amazing computer. I still have my M4 MacBook Air, my personal one. I'm not going to upgrade that just for the M5, but if you're in the market, and the MacBook Neo, which we're going to get to, if you're listening to this podcast, the MacBook Neo is probably not for you. Or if you have any question about RAM or storage, the Neo is probably not for you. The M5 MacBook Air is right here for you. It's great. And honestly, I've done video editing on the M4 MacBook Air. I do thumbnail design in Pixelmator Pro. It's great for so many things. The M5 MacBook Air can go a long way before you jump up to the MacBook Pros, which we'll get to. We'll save a whole segment for you to talk about.
It's totally fine.
Because it's in the rundown. I got it right over here.
It's totally fine.
It says the Jason yelling. That's the chapter. No, I'm just kidding.
No, the only thing I will say now though is that it is interesting, and we'll talk more about it in a couple minutes. But of note for the MacBook Air, people were very worried that Apple was going to have to pass along the increased cost of things like memory and storage, and not only did they not, right? Like they actually seem to have offered some savings to people. So,
right. Now this next one is a little confusing, and I'm going to need your assistance here.
I'm here for you.
The M5 Pro and M5 Max chips were also released, which was rumored. We have them in the new MacBook Pro, or just in the MacBook Pro models. More powerful chips. We have a new term now for cores. Previously, when Apple would talk about the cores on their M4 chips and earlier, they would say this many high-efficiency cores for things like single-threaded tasks and web browsing, whatever. And then they would have performance cores for things that are heavily GPU or whatever. But we now have something called a supercore. And there was actually, Gruber had this breakdown between like I'll have to find it, between the supercores and
well, let me help
cores.
You.
Yeah, you help me.
Actually, Gruber linked to something from Jason Snell that was the best way of thinking of this, which is he said, Batman is now Superman. Robin is now Batman. Okay, so here's what happened. No, here's what happened.
Okay.
The efficiency cores are just called performance cores now. And the performance cores are called super cores now. Here's why. Because I have never once heard this objection or complaint or pushback, but apparently Apple was feeling that by calling them efficiency cores, people thought they were bad.
I see.
So now the high efficiency cores are just called performance cores. They're just they do a good job. They're fine. They do it, but they are more efficient, whatever. And then the best cores are called super cores. They're just trying to eliminate a phrase that apparently gave the connotation that they weren't as good. They're just for a different purpose. So that's literally what happened. What was previously a performance core, Batman, is now Superman or super cores. What was previously an efficiency core or Robin is now what they call performance cores. And they retroactively applied that to the M5 MacBook Pro.
Got it. So we're not going to hear about efficiency cores ever again going forward.
Not on anything M5 or newer. Obviously, right. I believe all the tech specs on the M4 and previous still refer to efficiency cores and performance cores, and they don't care because they're not selling those products anymore, with the exception of the iPad Air, right?
Exactly. Okay. So that's the core breakdown.
Yeah, don't get confused. It's not really a new core or anything. It's just new naming.
Now, the performance, it's going to be better than the M4s and all that, but we need to talk about pricing because, again, the pricing has changed, but also the base storage has changed. So if you buy any MacBook Pro with an M5 chip right now, new from Apple, I'm going to go to this new configurator too. I don't know how I feel about it. I think maybe it's okay. Previously you would have 3 different models to start from. You would choose M5, M5 Pro, M5 Max, and maybe 2 configurations per chip, and then you would be thrown into the detail configurator. Now you get thrown just directly into the configurator. You choose your color, you choose your display, and then you choose your chip, and it's just all one place. I guess it's more streamlined, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't like it because I like the way they do it. I like the flow. I just don't like the order they put the things in. Makes sense to start with the size. I don't care about the color next. I could pick my color last because it's not determinate on anything else. Right. But the things that are determinate on other things, I feel like should come first.
That's what kept throwing me off because every time I was just wanted to see the storage pricing and memory pricing, and I wouldn't be able to click on, and it was because you have to click one of the colors. It's not just pre-chosen for you. You have to click a color. You have to click standard or nano texture display. I guess they don't want to have one already clicked for you because then it would.
Yeah, I don't know, but I understand those are the non-determinate variables, right? Color is irrelevant. Everything's available in each color, and everything's available nano texture or standard, and then everything else changes based on what you choose.
Right. So the M5 MacBook Pro lineup, the M5 the base M5 has changed by the base storage. The base storage is now 1 terabyte for the regular M5 MacBook Pro, not the M5 Pro or Max. Previously, that started at 512 gigabytes of storage. So that base storage is now raised. The price has gone from $15.99 previously with the 512 gig to now the cheapest you can get an M5 MacBook Pro is $16.99, but you get the higher storage. The pricing for the M5 Pro chip also has gone from $19.99 to $21.99. So an increase in $200, but also you get the 1 terabyte base storage standard. You also have to choose your number of CPU and GPU cores before you even get to the storage. But also 24 gigs of unified memory standard.
Which is an increase, I think.
Which is an increase. Previously it was 16 gigabytes. And if you go with the M5 Max chip, the starting price has gone from $31.99 to $25.99. But if you choose the M5 Max chip, even the base cores of 18 and 32, the base unified memory is 36 gigabytes and the base storage is 2 terabytes. So you actually cannot purchase a 1 terabyte M5 Max MacBook Pro. That is just not an option. Storage starts at 2 terabytes. So you're getting more computer, namely more storage and more memory for the similar prices that you had previously with the M4 Pro and M5 Max. You just don't have the lower tier options. Jason is waiting to go off on the pricing.
Well, I do want to make a quick correction. I said something that's not really true. The M4 Pro also started with 24 gigs of memory. Sorry, I think I said it was an increase, but it actually wasn't. I checked as you were talking because I thought, actually, I said a thing. I don't think that's right. So
okay, that's very good. Okay.
Well, Steven, I just have a question.
Please.
You listed some numbers.
I did.
And if you were to buy the M4 version with those same numbers, is the M5 version more or less expensive? than those same ones.
It would, in fact, be less expensive.
Yes. In every case, it's either the same or less expensive. So my question then is, did Apple raise or lower prices?
Okay, let's just talk about it now, because next we have the Studio Display and MacBook Neo.
But did you want to go through those first? We can, if that's important. Because clearly Apple raised the price on the Studio Display because they.
Okay,
I'm just kidding.
Let's talk about the Studio Display, because this
okay,
is
I'm sorry. You just have to tell me when it's time.
It's coming. It's coming. I'm going to keep it in the rundown where it's at.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at the rundown. I'm just looking at the screen you're sharing.
You're just looking through red. So that your eyes.
No, I'm not even mad. I'm so happy.
So, also that same day we got new, well, quote unquote, new Studio displays. So the Pro Display XDR has gone away. That is actually stated in the footnote on the newsroom article. You can read that the Studio Display XDR replaces the Pro Display XDR. So Apple does not make a 32-inch 6K display anymore anywhere.
And they disclose that in literally the least possible way that they could.
So Gruber actually posted his article saying, we're not sure what's happening with the Pro Display XDR. And I replied to him on Mastodon, actually, this footnote tells us. And then he actually corrected his article. But yeah, it's like the smallest footnote, and it's like, yeah. So no more Pro Display XDR. It's gone. So we have two new displays, still the regular Studio Display and now Studio Display XDR. They are both 27 inches. They are both 5K displays. If you had the previous Studio Display like I do, zero reason to upgrade. The only thing different is an improved camera, improved webcam, and I think the speakers may have improved. There's like a 6-speaker thing around it, but literally the panel, the 27-inch 5K display, I think is the same as the previous. Maybe it's slightly brighter on SDR content, but
I don't know if there's any difference there. But did it get it got Thunderbolt 5, right?
It did get Thunderbolt 5. That was the other difference. Thank you.
It's not a reason to upgrade by any means.
No.
But
no.
I mean, what it does do is make it a slightly better deal at the same price. If you were looking for a good display, it has a better webcam, which the Studio Display webcam was fine.
It was
better
fine.
Than some,
everybody complains about it. Like, what about, you're not filming your A-roll for YouTube on your Studio Display. If you're just doing Zoom calls, like, it's fine.
No, you're right. It's just that for like $29, you can get the Belkin thing and use your phone, and it's so much better.
Well, yeah, that's so much. Yeah, that's literally why that feature exists.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, and it still starts at $15.99. So. Is that really expensive for a 27-inch Retina panel that's existed for over a decade? Probably. Yes. But it's that's there. But the new display is the Studio Display XDR, also 27 inches, also 5K. But is it an HDR mini LED panel, up to 2,000 nits peak brightness, also 120 hertz refresh, so it has ProMotion. Although I don't think they really call it ProMotion. They just say 120 hertz refresh rate. But yeah, it is it's the nicer display, nicer technology, faster refresh rate, but it is only 27 inches. And it comes in at $3,300. It comes with the tilt and height adjustable stand included, Jason. That's a bargain. You had to pay like $1,000 for that, I feel like, with the Pro Display XDR.
Well, you had to pay $1,000 for any stand.
For any stand, right. The part that was insult to injury, though, this $3,300 display, you can also get nano texture for an additional $300 upcharge. No extra charge for tilt and height adjustable.
Well, that's because that's the only one that's available.
It's the only the one that I would want is the VESA mount adapter, because that's how I have my current one. Not any cheaper. I'm getting less product, but it's not any cheaper.
You're getting less aluminum.
I'm getting less aluminum, less hinges for the exact same price. I feel like, I don't know if the Mac Pro is like this, where you can buy like the rack-mounted Mac Pro and it won't have the feet or whatever. I feel like that version is cheaper. Let me see if it even.
I don't know.
Let me see if it's even still a thing. Can you still buy a Mac Pro?
You can. The rack is more expensive.
Well, the rack is more expensive. Never mind. Why? I don't know. But there's at least but anyway, I was like, when they announced it, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to get the VESA mount because that's how I currently have mine. Maybe it'll be cheaper. No, it's not.
I have a theory, Stephen.
Oh, okay, but yeah, please.
Well, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why this product exists marketing-wise. Like, why did they had the Pro Display XDR. Why did they kill that brand and just extend the Studio Display brand? and maybe they decided nobody cared about 6K, right? Maybe they just figured like even the people they were targeting with the Pro display would be fine with this. All of that stuff, that's great, because I personally think that this display, it's going to be gorgeous, also colossal waste of money. But I have a theory about why it exists. Because it makes the Vision Pro look like a good deal. Because the Vision Pro, you can get 2 OLEDs and stick them in front of your eyeballs and have as big of a display as you could possibly want. So if your choice is between a Studio Display XDR or buying a Vision Pro as a display option, the Vision Pro is an insanely better deal because it's also a Vision Pro that you could do other things in. See, Steven, why would anybody buy this if you could just buy a Vision Pro?
Well,
I mean, you already bought one.
Spoiler, I bought one. I bought one yesterday, and it's coming next
I tried
Wednesday.
so hard to talk Steven out of it. I really did.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing with the displays. Number one, you texted me, this is a terrible deal or whatever. You told me, don't buy this. Yeah, I forgot exactly what you texted me. It was something like that. Mac OS, its native scaling is at a 27-inch 5K display, or like the iMac, 24-inch 4.5K display, whatever that is, or 6K at 32 inches. macOS works with whatever monitor you plug in, and it looks fine. Sure, it's going to scale not natively. It scales a little weird. I notice that. 99% of people don't, and they don't care. I notice it. I want proper scaling. And so I asked on social media, and even in my YouTube video, tell me, a 27-inch monitor that's 5K, 120 hertz. Find me one. And I looked before I bought this, and I did not find one. Now, you can get the LG Ultrafine, but that doesn't have 120 hertz. But that's one of the reasons why that terrible display existed. Even though it was plasticky and not great, it was one of the only 5K 27-inch displays. So it is difficult to find one. Samsung announced some at CES earlier this year. They're not out yet. Can't buy it. And I think there was one LG at the end of last year. Everybody was like, this is a great studio display replacement because it was 5K 27 inches, but I don't think it had 120 hertz. I forget what that one was called. So if you want 5K 120 hertz mini LED, this Studio Display XDR is actually one of the few, if not only, choices. Is it overpriced? Sure, it's Apple. But I will also say, I use my Studio Display, I use all the things on Studio Display. I use the built-in camera because it's fine. I actually, when I edit videos, for better or for worse, I just use the Studio Display speakers because they actually sound pretty good. And I've edited enough of my videos and listened to them in headphones and made whatever adjustments. Like, I could just use the Studio Display speakers, and they sound good. This new Studio Display, the regular and XDR, improved speakers. 6-speaker array, it's going to have better bass. That's an upgrade. Also, the camera's better. But for what I want, no, is a guarantee. I want a guarantee that macOS is going to scale properly and that it's going to look great. And the Studio Display XDR is that. Plus, it's my 40th birthday next week, and so I bought it for myself.
But also the Studio Display you already have on your desk does that.
It doesn't do 120 hertz in XDR.
When have you ever needed your display on your desktop to do 120 hertz?
Anytime I scroll anything.
Why?
Because it looks so, I look so much better. I noticed ProMotion on my iPad Pro. That's why I don't use an iPad Air.
I don't believe you. I mean, you're probably telling the truth, but I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that for the things that people are doing on their, I don't know. Maybe I am just one of those people who just can't see ProMotion, but I definitely think I can tell the difference, but I also just definitely don't care. I pull out the iPad mini and I read stuff and I'm like, it's not as smooth, but like, I'm like, so?
Well, when you do video and audio editing, you're scrolling a lot across a long timeline, and the visual fidelity of what you can see while you scroll quickly actually, I think there is a value there. And that is one of the reasons why I edit podcasts on iPad Pro rather than a different iPad. And listen, I'm going to review it. I'm going to do a whole video on it on the YouTube channel. And if I've never used a 120 hertz display with my Mac, I have no idea. Maybe it isn't that big of a deal on a Mac. I'm not sure. But I will definitely be talking about it in a video because...
I mean, I've gone back and forth many times between a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air. And there is a difference. The MacBook Pro's display is very, very nice. But it is not like moving. But I use a MacBook Air almost all the time, and it's fine. Or I use a Studio Display almost all the time, and I've never once thought, you know what this display needs? Mini LED. Like I just,
it might be beautiful. I'm just saying it might.
It's gonna. Oh no. It's going to be absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
My recommendation to Steven was keep the one you have and go buy yourself a nice LG G5 OLED if you just want to watch beautiful content.
Well, I might be getting that too. We'll see.
Okay.
I might be getting a new TV. We'll see.
I'm going to start a YouTube channel, actually.
John Syracuse, I was talking to him on Mastodon about what TV I should buy if I want to buy an OLED. And he said the LG G5. Is that the one you have? The LG G5 OLED?
Well, we have an earlier. It's the G series. It's not. We
Okay.
bought it like a couple of years ago. It's by like the G2 or something.
Well, and then Syracuse had just replied to me on Mastodon saying apparently the G6 series comes out in like 24 days. And I'm like, I just wanted to get it.
You just get it.
I'm
It'll be
just gonna
fine.
get it, probably.
Like the only things that really seem to change are sometimes like sustained brightness or whatever.
Which I'm not even.
But if you're buying an OLED, you already are agreeing that there's going to be some compromise on max brightness.
And the room I'll be putting it in has 0 windows.
Then you don't. Then you could buy a 7-year-old G series. Like you could buy the G. You could. It'd be fine.
You know what's crazy is that TV that I'm looking at, the LG G5 77-inch, is the exact same price as the Studio Display XDR.
This is my point that I was making. Steven,
Yeah.
you could, if you're going to put it in a dark room, you could buy my Samsung Plasma that I rave
Get
about.
outta here, get outta
I'm
here.
just saying.
Anyway, the other thing I'll say, and then we'll talk about the MacBook Neo. I asked on social media, is there any way to use a Studio Display with an HDMI video input? Because I have a BenQ. This is actually a 32-inch monitor as my multi-view. So I have all my camera shots over here, and I use it for when I'm filming. And it's fine. It's not a great display. It's fine. But it's not good at the highlights. And so when I film my phone, which as you imagine I do pretty often, on the BenQ monitor, it appears slightly blown out, whereas the actual video footage is not. And because I know that, I'll kind of adjust and it'll be a little blown out on this BenQ while I'm filming, and it's fine when I go to edit it. But I imagine if I use this Studio Display as my multi-view, that I'll get a better idea of the actual camera recording as opposed to the BenQ. So I asked online, and apparently you have to do this weird rigmarole because the Studio Display doesn't have an HDMI input. It's expecting DisplayPort signal. And so you would have to have an HDMI to DisplayPort adapter that also includes like a bidirectional data something. So you have to plug it into a USB source as well. And then you go DisplayPort to USB-C cable to the Studio Display. I ordered all those accessories yesterday. It was like $30. I'm going to try it. I get all of it today. I'm going to see if it actually works. If I can have my Blackmagic 810 Mini Pro, the multi-view out into the Studio Display. And if it does, I think I'm going to replace this BenQ and put my regular Studio Display up there, and I'll have my Studio Display XDR up here, and I'll be a happy guy.
I mean, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen.
What's going to happen?
Well, first of all, the Studio Display is still SDR, so it's not going to be any different. It's going to look just as blown out, it's going to look exactly the same.
It's going to be a better representation of colors.
Is the BenQ is not P3?
This BenQ, I'll find it because I bought it on Amazon when we moved into this house. It was like the cheapest BenQ I could find.
And then the other thing is you are doing so many things to the signal between source and output that I don't think you're going to be able to trust it any better. It's like, let me convert this 4 times and hope that it's better.
That is a good point. But I'm going to look up this BenQ. But it was like it's 32 inches. I think it's a 1080p monitor.
Yeah, that's because they're like designed for print output.
Yeah, I know. But like, okay, where is it? Here it is. Oh, no, it is. It's 27 inch. I don't know why that looks so different than my Studio Display. Probably because of the bezels.
Probably.
But anyway, I ordered this May 22nd, 2022, so almost 4 years ago. It is a 27-inch 1080p IPS display or whatever.
Okay.
Does it have
P3?
No. I'm doing a find on page for P3. It does not have P3.
Probably has Adobe color. I don't know. Okay, we don't have to talk about the BenQ anymore. But I'm just telling you, I don't think you're going to get what you want.
Well, we'll see. I'll literally test it as soon as I get the adapters. I'll unplug my Mac Studio and just try it. But this is the I'm gonna put this in the show notes just for the heck of it, so everybody can see the monitor I'm looking at. Because you can still buy it. It's $200. It's a $200 monitor. It is the BenQ old monitor, and it's fine. Like it's fine, but it uses brightness intelligence, BI.
Sounds a lot like BS. I don't know.
I was just thinking that. I was so close to making that.
I know, but I'm the one that will just say it.
Yeah, you just said it. So anyway, that's a monitor I've been using for the last 4 years, and maybe I'll put the studio display. And it's a VESA mount. I got all the VESA mounts. So anyway, all right, we got to talk about the MacBook Neo and my bad YouTube title that Jason called, but that YouTube agreed. Jason and YouTube actually agreed. But before we do, I want to thank our wonderful sponsors. The first one being Quo, Quo. Here's what you do. Spring is a natural reset point. I was literally just cleaning out my office yesterday. I was sending a bunch of products back to Apple, which, Jason, you would be proud, or maybe jealous. I don't know. But I literally... Actually, let me ask you this. We already started the ad. This is the ad break. But can you ever put like multiple review units that you've got in the past into one box and just send it back? Or do you have
We
to send...
talked about this.
We have, right? That's what I thought.
Literally all I do is I just save like the labels. Then I ship back a box with all the devices.
That's right.
And all the other labels. I just put them in there and say, here you go. Here's your labels. Here's your devices. And I put one on the outside. Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I said maybe we could talk about this later, but I put my M5 Vision, not mine. I put Apple's M5 Vision Pro, M5 MacBook Pro, and my iPhone 16e all in one box to ship it back. So
Good stuff.
Anyway, so you were doing that. It's like a spring natural reset point. I was resetting and cleaning my office, sending stuff back. And if you've been putting up the messier parts of your business, now is the time. That's why this episode is brought to you by Quo, Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 reviews, built for how modern teams work. That's why more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams, rely on Quo to stay connected, professional, and consistently reachable. Quo works wherever you are, right from an app on your phone or your computer, lets you keep your existing numbers, and you can add new numbers, teammates, in minutes, sync your CRM, and rely on seamless routing and call flows as your business scales. And it's not just a phone system. Quo's AI automatically logs calls, generates summaries, and highlights new steps so nothing gets lost. It can even qualify leads or respond after hours. So don't do that old phone system anymore. I've used lots of those old systems in the past. Quo is the smart system you need for your business. So make the season where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/primary. That's QUO.com/primary. Quo, no missed calls, no missed. That's Quo. Our thanks to Quo for sponsoring this episode, and our friends at Anthropic. Now, we talk about Claude and Anthropic all the time on this show, but I'm just going to talk from my personal experience right now, because I've been using Claude pretty much every day to build shortcuts. And I will say, when I'm asking it about APIs, if I'm asking it about matching text to regex, if I have no idea what I'm looking at, I'll literally just take a screenshot, give it to Claude, and Claude tells me what to do. And Claude has been really helpful with it. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle problems that matter. And what I've talked about on this show and what I've been using a lot of is Claude Cowork. Cowork brings Claude Co's agentic power to your desktop, to your Mac. I use it on my Mac. No terminal required, so anyone can use and have Claude do real work. Point it to a folder on your computer, or add connectors like Google Drive, Gmail. There's even an Apple Notes connector. Describe what you need, and it handles the rest, like organizing files, building spreadsheets, or drafting reports. Listen, I've tried to build shortcuts that will, rename files and put things in different folders. It can-ish do it. Claude Cowork can do it in seconds, and it's actually way better at it. I just pointed Claude at a folder on my desktop. I said, rename all these files, organize them in different folders, and Claude Cowork can just go and do it. And the best part is, you can give Claude access to a single folder, so it's not running across your entire computer, and you can always revoke that access later if you don't want to do that. But then you can use all the first-party connectors that Anthropic provides, so you're not installing these shady MCP servers from somewhere. But Claude can do all of that, and Cowork is super powerful. So if you're ready to tackle bigger problems, get started with Claude today at claude.ai/primary. That's claude.ai/primary, and check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all of the features mentioned in today's episode. That's claude.ai/primary. Our thanks to Claude for sponsoring this episode. All right, the MacBook Neo, Jason. One thing, we're going to talk about Gurman in a second.
That's fine.
He did call the name. He did call MacBook Neo the name.
That's true. And apparently they leaked the name the day before or something like that in some list.
Yes. It was on a regulatory filing. Mac Rumors actually found the name. And so, yeah, the name linked. They have a whole new font for this new computer, which is right here on the Neo webpage. It is Apple's cheapest MacBook ever. starting at $599. Education discount. This is a $500 computer. Now, you have like one option. You can change the storage. It comes with 256 base storage, and you can buy that for the $599. Or you can upgrade to $699, and you get 512 gigabytes of storage. You get Touch ID. Touch ID is only on that more expensive model. And my mouse just died, so I have to plug in my Magic Mouse and turn it upside down like a turtle. So we're just going to stare at this madness if you're watching on YouTube.
But good thing that the MacBook Neo has a trackpad. And it's actually
yes, it does.
An actual physical trackpad, not a force touch.
Physical trackpad. I saw Andrew Edwards' video was really good. He actually clicked the trackpad in all the places, and you see the trackpad physically depress. If you didn't know, MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros for years have had a force touch trackpad where it's haptic feedback making you think you're clicking it, but the trackpad is actually not depressing. Well, the MacBook Neo has gone back to actual depressing. What? That's what it is.
I know, but it's just like that trackpad is not depressing.
Not depressing.
Right.
It's not depressing at all. It's exciting force touch. Now, without force touch, it means you can't do the longer press. Like if you want to define a word, which again, if you didn't know, you could like deep press on a word and it brings up the dictionary.
Turn that off. I hate that.
I actually turned it off too, but that was the thing you could do with the force trackpad. It comes in fun colors. It has like kind of a lime green, which they call citrus, which I thought would have been an orange color. They have like the a pinkish color, the indigo blue, and silver. It is a 13-inch laptop, I think 12.9-inch specifically. But this is like, it's a brand new MacBook, and it is the cheapest ever. And I think this is going to sell like hotcakes, as they say.
How much have you ever gone somewhere and ordered hotcakes?
No.
Okay.
I think they're pancakes, right? It's pancakes.
Yeah, but I just was curious.
No, I've never said
that phrase has never made any sense.
That might have been the first time I ever said the word hotcakes in like 12
Right.
years. I don't know. But this is going to be massive. Obviously, Apple is going after the education crowd. I mean, education discount of $500 brand new MacBook is wild. So it's going to go after that, students, maybe even into college students. And I saw a lot of discourse on social media of like, this isn't enough computer for a college student. It's like, listen, I was in college once.
That's better than twice or three times. So that's good.
Well, sure. Well, masters, doctors, I don't know. But in college, you spend a lot of time just staring at websites and reading and then writing things about what you have read. I feel like this would be a perfect laptop for that. Now, if your college student has any interest in photography, graphic design, video, get the MacBook Air. The M5 MacBook Air is literally right there. Buy it and get an education discount on that. And that's a great deal. But for students, there's so many people in my life where I feel like this would be the ideal computer for a lot of people. And there was actually, hopefully my mouse is charged up enough. How much does the Magic Mouse charge in 10 seconds? Does it?
Maybe a podcast.
Let's see if it lasts the rest of the podcast. I wanted to point out this one tweet. This was Austin on X. He said, as a person in sales, all my work is done in a browser and an Outlook and Excel. This will easily be replacing my terrible work-issued laptop that constantly needs to restart to update and has a 3-hour battery life. I feel like this is indicative of the exact audience, not only students, but adults too, where this is the case, where they had a base model HP or a cheap work laptop and they just can't stand it. The MacBook Neo is going to be a glass of ice water in hell for them because a lot of these computers on the Windows side are just terrible.
Absolutely. Yeah. The thing people keep saying is like, oh, well, there's been some interesting pushback. I don't know if we're ready for that or not, but I think that I push back a little bit on the idea that this is a device aimed at the education market. And I think it's easy to think like this is great for students. I think that's true. I would much rather, like, we have purchased M1 MacBook Airs, and we even have an old Intel MacBook Air that our child is using so that they don't have to use the Chromebooks from the school because they are just hot garbage. And it's like these things are like a dumpster fire of technology and no one should be forced to use them, but they are, except Google has done such a good job because Apple mostly abandoned the education market, and every student has to use Google Classroom and Slides and Docs and Gmail. And so I don't think schools are just going to start buying $500 MacBook Neos when they're buying $125 HP garbage Chromebooks, right? That's not necessarily the market for it. But for parents like us who are like, I don't want my student to ever have to touch a Chromebook. Or like we have a daughter who's going to be going off to college soon. Would I buy her this over an M5 MacBook Air? Probably not, because I could buy her one M5 MacBook Air and never have to buy her another computer and like be like, you could use this for 7 years, right? And she's using an Intel MacBook Air right now. It's at least 7 years old, right? Like, so I think that but I think you're right. They are going to sell a ton of them, and in our bonus episode, I'm going to explain how I'm trying to convince my parents to buy one.
Exactly. And like, my mom uses an iPad Pro right now. If she ever needed a Mac for reasons, for whatever reason, like this would be the Mac I would get her. Like this would be the one. A couple of things, then we'll get into some of the other criticisms. The launch video for the MacBook Neo was amazing. This is one of the best marketing videos. This feels like old school Apple, and it's wonderful. And so kudos for all of that. That was super fun. My video, by the way, you sent me the the picture. Apparently, it was like the AI overview in Google.
Yes,
my video made the AI
it definitely was. When I okay, foreshadowing some of the pushback. Lots of people were like, "Why wouldn't you just buy a refurbished M2 MacBook Air?" And I was like, "Because the A18 Pro is actually better." And so I literally just typed in compare A18 Pro to M2, and Steven's face pops up. It's amazing.
So that was super fun. That, and then also, as I normally do with YouTube videos, you can do A/B title testing. And I got a text from Jason being like, "That's not the price of the computer," or something. Because the 3 titles I tested was MacBook Neo, Apple's cheapest laptop ever. I tested Apple's $500 MacBook is here, but should you buy it? And then the last title, MacBook Neo versus MacBook Air, every difference explained. Now, YouTube will automatically... an A/B test can go on for like weeks or hours, depending on how quickly YouTube identifies the winning combination. And so typically my A/B test will go for at least several days. This one switched over in like 3 hours. And the video was performing extremely well. It was the highest performing video in a while. And it got 40% watch time share as opposed to the other 2 videos, which got like 32 and 27%. So the final title was MacBook Neo versus MacBook Air. Probably helped with that Google AI overview answer. Yeah. But you took issue with my title, Apple's $500 MacBook is here.
I'm just saying it's not a $500 MacBook. It's a $600 MacBook that's available for $500 for with an education discount. And I know that seems silly. And I also know that a lot of the people who will be buying this will be buying it with an education discount because that's the obvious market. But I just feel like, I don't know. I don't like it when it's like, this car is, it's like when Tesla markets their car after the tax credit and fuel savings. The tax credit's one thing, but when they're like, this car will only cost you this much because you won't spend it. That's what I'm saying. That's the thing I don't like. And
I will tell you, I wrestled with that title. I was like, should I put Apple's $599 MacBook is here or $500 MacBook is here? Because it did feel like $500 is a little disingenuous because most people who buy it maybe. And I don't know how Apple's education discount works right now. Like, you used to just be able to like go to the education part of the Apple site and just order it, and there was no like, quote, sorry.
I don't know if you're supposed to tell people that.
It's right there. Like, you know, other services, like if you want to get student pricing on Adobe's Creative Cloud or whatever, you basically have to have like a .edu email address or some proof that you're a student or educator. And Apple's deal is not really like that. It has.
If you buy it as a K through 12 student, there's a different set of standards. But if you say you're buying it for college, basically your Apple ID can buy one of each product each year.
Right. So that's like, you know, I get it. It is a $599 computer. That's the price that Apple has. So I wrestled with that title. I'm kind of glad that title didn't win out, because if it did, then it means the video would basically be, you know, based around that premise, which I wouldn't feel comfortable. So I was glad it went out, and I do agree. I wrestled with that. But to the pushback, as soon as this came out, I posted about it. Everybody posted about it. People started complaining about upgradability, that you can't get 16 gigs of unified memory, or that you can't get a 1 terabyte hard drive. And go ahead, Jason.
Well, I just think if you care about any of those things, this is not a computer for you. If you're listening to this podcast, if it is a computer for you, it's just because you think it's really cool, and that's great. It's going to cost you way less than Steven just spent on that monitor, so good for you. Like, that is fine.
Or you're that sales guy, and you're in a truck all day, and you have a terrible HP laptop.
Fair point. But my thing, like, people are basically saying things along the lines of like, this thing is terrible. It's basically just an iPad. Or if they can run macOS on an iPhone chip, why can't we run it on an iPad? Which is weird because neither of those things are the same. And it's like, first of all, this thing basically has a slightly scaled down M4 in it. The A18 Pro is the same process as the M4.
It's a 3-nanometer process.
Amazing.
It's an amazing chip.
And the M2, which everyone is saying just get a used M2 or a refurbished M2 or whatever anyway, that's a 5-nanometer process. The the iPhone 16 Pro beats the M2 in single core process, which, just so you know, everything you do on a daily basis, listeners, is single core. Unless you're exporting Steven's timeline for him. That's literally it. Everything else is, even if you're doing multiple of those things at once, that's not multi-core. That is multiple single cores. Multi-core means that the application and the operating system divide a process out across multiple cores at the same time. So to render a timeline, if you just open your browser, your email, and start streaming Netflix at the same time, like that's just multiple single cores.
Right.
This will be faster at that.
Right.
And the M2 is barely faster at multi-core than the iPhone 16 Pro, which tells you that in a laptop form factor, the A18 Pro will probably be better because it has way more place to dissipate heat. So, and it doesn't have an OLED screen basically laying on top of the processor. Okay. Right. Don't buy an M2 MacBook Air. This is not for people who are thinking of buying that. This is for people who are thinking of, I would never buy, like literally I would never buy a Mac because they're just too expensive, and look what I can get as a PC. I know it's garbage, but it's only $499. This is the computer for those people. Apple realizes, you know, all of our fans, they're already buying Macs and they're literally never going to switch back. And they probably have noticed that people who buy Macs and get used to using a Mac basically never switch to something else. So the more people we can get and the products we can offer to those people, and especially if those are college students or high school students, because guess what? Now it's like the old the cigarette companies, like we can lock in the teenagers. We got a customer for life until they die, which will probably happen earlier than we expected because they're smoking. But buying a MacBook Neo means the next purchase is going to be a MacBook Air and then a MacBook Pro or a Mac Studio or a Mac Mini or whatever. So
yeah, I would say the only reason someone should consider an M2 MacBook Air over this is if for some reason they're going to be using it and they want a lot of storage. They want a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte SSD for reasons. I don't think the unified memory is a good reason to do an M2 Air. If you're even thinking that you might need 24 gigs of unified memory or more, you should be looking at the M5 MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro model. Only reason would be storage. And the only thing I could think of where someone would benefit from the MacBook Neo but might need more storage is like if you like saving a lot of photos on your computer. But even that, if you're taking that many photos that's not just on your phone, you're probably more closer to a photographer than just a regular consumer, and you probably shouldn't get the Neo or even the M2 Air. You should probably get the M5 Air. So I agree. Like if you're thinking that if you wish this thing could upgrade more, this computer is not for you. You can
buy an M4 MacBook Air refurbished with 16 gigs of memory and 256 for $750. Why would you buy an M2?
Again, the storage, because once you try to get a terabyte in that M4, then you're talking about over $1,000.
I mean, I would say the market of M2s that are available with a terabyte of storage is pretty small. And I looked it up on B&H and they're $1,200. So
right, that's what I'm saying. And so if for some reason the storage is primary, but the MacBook Neo, again, like most people who listen to tech podcasts and watch tech YouTube videos, it's probably not the audience. Unless, again, like I'm using the one sales guy as an example, but there were several people who were in my replies that were like, I have a terrible HP laptop or my work laptop stinks. And so this is going to be a great thing because all they do is either live in a web browser, stare at a spreadsheet, or whatever. Now, I bought my wife an M2 MacBook Air last year, and I debated, should I have gotten the M4 or whatever? And when I see her using it, it's like, no, it's fine. Because she browses the web, she'll read a PDF, and then she looks at a number spreadsheet. Not even a big, it's not a big spreadsheet. There's not complicated calculations or anything. It's just a normal spreadsheet. And honestly, I'm not sure today, if I were to buy her a laptop today, I don't know if I would get the MacBook Neo or a refurbished MacBook Air, but I think the MacBook Neo would have sufficed. And I don't think she would have ever had a complaint because like she's not using Apple Intelligence. It's not any of those kinds of things. I think the MacBook Neo would have been fine. And you can get colors. You can get fun colors in the MacBook Neo. Yeah. And I think that's a thing.
Yeah. I think the objections are just funny. Now, to be fair, I am on Apple's payroll now. So I have spent the last day evangelizing for the MacBook Neo. I'm not actually on Apple's payroll.
Full disclosure,
very
you're
clear.
not on Apple's payroll.
I'm definitely not. But I think, and also I wouldn't care nearly this much if I had just spent the day not on Threads yesterday.
Pied Piper of trolls. Yeah. So anyway, that's the MacBook Neo. I think it's exciting. The fact that Apple is going into like this, actually cheaper prices, like navigating into like sub 1,000 devices. And I did see some theories. I'm curious the name. I like the MacBook Neo name. I think the fact that it doesn't sound like a previous Apple product shows the strategy that Apple is using. Like this is for, like you're saying, not longtime Mac users, not big Apple, people in the Apple world. Do you think they'll use the Neo for any other devices, like an iPad Neo?
No, there's too many. There's iPad, iPad Mini, iPad Air, and iPad Pro. They cannot have another version of the iPad. And I don't think they would use it on the iPhone unless that's what they decided to call the Fold. But that would be confusing because, that doesn't signify anything. But also the other names don't signify. Pro doesn't really. I mean, it's a phone. Like that doesn't really signify. Right. Phones are not Pro versus not Pro. It just means better camera, right? And you have iPad Air, which just means the one you should buy, right? Air is the only one that has any meaning. MacBook Air, the one you should buy. iPad Air, the one you should buy. That's the only word that means anything.
That's what Air means. Although, some people were saying it's the MacBook Air nomenclature is going to be weird because if this is a smaller, cheaper MacBook, then the Air is not the smallest, cheapest. But in fact, the MacBook Neo and MacBook Air are the same weight, 2.7 pounds, and the MacBook Neo is actually slightly thicker. So with the lids closed next to each other, the MacBook Neo is thicker than the MacBook Air. So Apple has actually managed to keep the MacBook Air the thinnest laptop and the lightest, tied with the MacBook Neo, but for a larger screen than, it is like the lightest of that screen size. So anyway.
Yeah. Just to be clear, iPhone Air, probably not the one you should buy. It's great, but
fair.
It's probably not the one you should buy.
That's fair. All right, so that's exciting. I did order one. They come. Everything is up for pre-order now. You can get, everything is available in store Wednesday, March 11th. I was curious if the shipping times had even slipped, but as you go off about pricing, I'll look that up. but I just, Jason has been waiting to talk about pricing.
Well, all I want to say is,
let's frame it. Let's frame it. This was Gurman wrote an article about all the stuff. And the headline of the article is Apple raises MacBook Air and Pro prices in face of memory crunch.
Yeah. And I just took a screenshot and I posted on Threads. This is a weird headline because at every single configuration that you can buy, the price of of both the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro are either the same or less expensive than they were in the M4 version. Okay. Now, what is true is that they eliminated the lowest configuration of basically everything. Right? They don't sell the 256 gig version of the MacBook Air anymore. You have to buy the 512. But so that was what Stephen was talking about before. It went from $999 to $1099. But Stephen, how much was the 512 version before Tuesday?
Was it $11.99?
Yes, it's $100 cheaper than it was the day before. The previous version was the day before. So it feels weird to say, because this implies this very specific thing. The prices of everything got more expensive. That's what that headline means, in that they got more expensive because there's a memory crunch. Except literally they didn't change the upgrade price of any of the memory configurations. The storage configurations some of them actually went down. Some of the upgrades decreased in price. Like the gap between like a 4 terabyte and 8, I don't remember which ones they were, 2 and 4 maybe, actually decreased. It is true that they eliminated a SKU, the lowest price. So you do actually have to spend more money to buy any MacBook Air. Now, I don't know what percentage of people buy the base. I don't think anybody should just buy the base. I think you should get the 512, which means this is a much better deal because you save $100 now.
And I think the example that you told me in the pre-show, if the M4 MacBook Air was $999 last week, and you had to buy an M4 MacBook Air this week from Apple, and it was $1099, that would have been raising the price on the same product. Yes. That would have been raising a price. And this is a new product, the M5 MacBook Air, with a different configuration. Yes, it is true. You could buy a brand new MacBook Air for $999 last week, and this week you would have to pay $1099. But I do think that distinction there is a difference. Like, it is not raising the price of the previous product. It is a new product at a different price. Now, to not Gurman's point, but Tim Cook had said on the earnings call earlier this year that Apple is going to have to do things to help mitigate some of the supply chain with memory and storage issues. Is this that? I don't know, but I think it's interesting that the iPad Air has more memory and is the same price. The iPhone 17e comes with more storage and is the same price as the 16e. So there are several cases, and the Studio Display, I mean, it actually has an A chip inside, and there's some unified memory in there. The base Studio Display is the same price as the previous model, and it's upgraded. So, and the Neo is now out there. Like, the Neo is out there with $500 on an education discount. So I'm just saying, I think it is a new product at a new price point, to your point. And you do have to explain, like, why then none of these other products raised in price. The 17e didn't get more expensive. The iPad Air didn't get more expensive. So,
and here's the distinction, I guess, that's important. So, okay, it is true that in order to buy, Apple did make it more expensive to buy a MacBook Air. Okay. But that, I would argue, is not the same thing as saying Apple raised prices on the MacBook Air. Do you remember, like, was it when they went from the M2 to M3 or the M1 to M2, they actually raised prices on that model? It like went from $999 to $1099, but it was for the same 128 gig base storage, 8 gigs of memory or something like that. They actually did raise the prices. That was a price raise. But I don't think that's not the same thing. And I made the case, which is what you were just talking about in the article that I wrote. I wrote that everyone expected Apple to raise prices, but what it did was much smarter. Apple was able to preserve some of its margin by the way that it structured this without actually having to charge more for things like the memory and the storage. They had such great margins that they figured out a way to do this that doesn't just make customers feel like they're just being bilked for more money. Because Apple's storage, like, Apple would charge you $200 to go from 8 gigs to, or no, what was it? Like 16 gigs to 24?
16 to 24, yeah.
Which is like $30 worth of DDR4. Now, right now it's like $700.
Right,
but I mean, the point
yeah.
is, like, the historic cost of that was not what they were charging. And that's where they made a lot of their margin, which actually makes me think most people aren't buying the base model because Apple's margins were so good. I think a lot of people were paying that upgrade tax. And they managed to do it in a way that didn't pass along those prices in increases. And so I just felt like that headline to say Apple raised prices in face of a memory crunch, I don't know if I would say it's like, I do think it's misleading. And Mark Gurman's response to me was, there's not a single word in that headline that's not true. And I'm like, you're making an argument that you feel like you can get away with because you picked, like, did the price get more expensive? Yes. But did Apple go through and increase the prices of the different configurations? No, like, it didn't. And so there's two analogies I used. One, if you go to the Shell station and you regularly buy unleaded 88 octane or whatever, and you go one day and it's $2.99 and the next day it's $3.39, they raise prices, right? The price
right, the same
that happens at gas stations every single week, right? Like, that's just a constant process. But if that gas station just for whatever reason stops selling 88 and now you had to buy 90, they didn't raise the price of the 90 necessarily, but it did get more expensive. And I know that feels like semantics, but I do think that that's an important distinction. And the other reason I think it's important is I gave Steven this analogy. Tesla recently stopped selling its two most expensive vehicles, the Model X and the Model S. They no longer sell them. You cannot buy them. The 100,000, whatever. Does that mean Tesla lowered prices? If a company can eliminate its most expensive configuration and that's not lowering prices, why would the opposite be true?
Yeah. It took me a while. I understood where you were coming from after our pre-show. And so I'll put a link to Jason's article in the show notes. Makes sense. You get more computer.
Also, listeners, I need you to do me a favor. Please. If you care about this sort of thing, just follow me on Threads. Really, follow me on Threads.
The only people who follow Jason are people who get mad at him.
No, none of those people follow me. They just drop into my replies.
Yeah. I link Jason's threads all the time. If you ever want to see trolls, just look for Jason's posts. They all follow.
I know. I'm like a peanut butter and honey sandwich that got left out on the counter for too long, and there's just flies everywhere.
It's amazing. All right, we got to do a lightning round here. There were a bunch of other stuff that happens. The Nothing event was actually today. There's a bunch of creators there. Nothing 4A Pro phone came out and a regular 4A. I don't really have a ton of the specs. I mean, I don't know who's into the Nothing phones. I liked how they look. I actually got a 3A last year to play around with, and I kind of liked the Nothing aesthetic. But the Nothing Phone 4A is out there. They actually covered up with some metal on the 4A Pro, so it's not the fully transparent design that it was last time with the Pros. So there's the 4A Pro and Nothing Headphone A, which I think is really interesting. They released the Nothing Headphone 1 last year. I actually reviewed those and really liked them. I thought they sounded good. I really loved all the physical tactile controls on the Nothing headphones. Well, now they have the Nothing Headphone A, which is $100 less. It's coming in at $199, so $200. Still has all the same tactile controls. The Verge is saying that the outgoing call quality is not great and it comes with a bag instead of a case. But for $200, a high-quality over-the-ear headphones with a bunch of physical buttons, and it now comes in colors. You can get like yellow, black, white, and another color like caps on the headphones. I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get some to try, but it looks fun.
I think any headphones that are, less than 80% the cost of a MacBook Neo are a good deal.
Yellow, pink, white, and black. Sorry. I like the yellow look. I know Canoopsy on YouTube is 100% going to get that yellow version. But I'm going to give Nothing credit because when it comes to just like tech companies and products, like they are very clearly unique. They are themselves. They are not trying to be anybody else. And I think they accomplished that. And it's not like it's an interesting aesthetic. It's probably divisive, but I don't know. I kind of like it.
I mean, basically, they just copied these Bowers and Wilkins.
What do you got there?
They just copied these Bowers and Wilkins. That's what they did. They just copied this literally. This is the design.
That is a very similar design.
Yeah, these are 10 years old. They just copied them.
I was talking more about their website.
I'm just saying.
No, but that's
every time I look at those Nothing and people are like, look at how unique this design is. I'm like, dude, I bought these like before the pandemic.
They'll look suspiciously like these, but just Nothing in general. Their phones especially, I do feel like their design is pretty unique. But all right, next, full disclosure, Anthropic was a sponsor of this episode. If you didn't hear that sponsorship because you're a member, but we do have some Anthropic news, which is that after last week's episode, it came out that the Trump administration was going to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk, which we talked about in the last episode as it might happen. And the administration is like, we are going to do this because Anthropic refused to allow the Department of Defense to use Claude however they saw fit. There was an interesting article from Ben Thompson, and then there was some pushback on that saying, yeah, all kinds of things. But I just want to say the latest news is that Anthropic is still trying to make a last-ditch effort to be the AI provider for the Department of Defense. They're, it seems like, meeting today, Thursday, and try to hash this out. OpenAI was quick to jump in and be like, hey, if Anthropic's a security risk, we will do the things for the Department of Defense. But it would take a very long process for Claude and Anthropic to be removed from all these government agencies and processes and to put OpenAI in. So I think the government's probably incentivized to try and make it work with Anthropic, but we'll see. Also, if Anthropic was designated a supply chain risk, that would affect other companies besides the U.S. And speaking of our friend Gurman again, he said that even Apple they largely use Claude internally at Apple, and it would mean that Apple might have to reconsider or try to change the AI internally that they're using. So this has ramifications even outside the Pentagon, but it's pretty wild. Dario Amodei. Just wanted to say his name once.
That's
CEO.
great. I'm not gonna. We don't have time, but I just want to be on the record because later people will be like, "Why didn't you talk about this?" Whatever. So the tough thing about this situation is that Dario Amodei is. I posted this in response to something online because the news came out. I think it was The Information had an article, a memo that he had sent to employees about the whole thing.
Yes,
and it was not very favorable about OpenAI's willingness to make a deal.
Or the Trump administration.
Right. Absolutely. I think he is both a very unreliable narrator and also probably right, like which is unfortunately the entire situation we live in today is that people are like his motivations are not what you always think that they are, but he's also saying things that are absolutely true. Or, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to vouch for him, but like it's plausible that what he's saying is true. And also, I don't know what to do with that information because I don't really trust you necessarily. And it is unfortunate because I don't know. Yeah.
We'll follow up next week what actually comes of this because Amodei is in talks with the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Emil Michael, today. That's who he's talking to. And that was according to the Financial Times. So we'll see what comes of that. It was kind of hilarious how quickly OpenAI was like, "We'll do it."
Yeah. Look
We'll
at
be
us.
there.
We're here. We got
No
it.
problem.
Just you write a check. We're there. Tell us what you want us to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just so people know kind of what we're talking about, there was the news over this earlier this week so that people understand like how this is used. So it turns out that Anthropic actually works with Palantir, which we talked about before.
Yes.
And what happens is Palantir gathers all this intelligence and all this information, and Anthropic's models are what makes sense of it. And so they were talking about how Anthropic was used, or Claude was used in these strikes on Iran. What that means is that it was Claude that was sifting through all of the data at Palantir to identify targets and locations. So you can just imagine having to pluck that out of that and drop a different model in. That disrupts a lot of things.
A lot of things. And now that we're kind of in the middle of something, that would probably be even more disruptive.
Yes.
So we'll follow up on that as news comes out. Also, speaking of OpenAI, ChatGPT 5.3 was released earlier this week, which was a thing. I didn't even really see it come in my Mac app. This is like for web search, I guess, but hey, it's out there. I don't know. Did you know anything about this?
No, I didn't really notice, but I did see this headline to make it less cringe.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know either.
I don't know what that means, but that came out. Bigger news, the Netflix Warner Brothers Discovery deal has now passed to Paramount officially. So Netflix is out of the race. This happened, I think, as last week's episode was airing or shortly after. But Netflix said this is getting too expensive for us. Netflix is not going to try and acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. So it is now Paramount Plus to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. We still have to go through all the regulatory approvals and things like that. But then Paramount said they are probably going to combine HBO Max and Paramount Plus to become one streaming platform. I just feel like none of this is great.
Well, okay, there's only two things you need to know about this. Yes. One is Ted Sarandos, friggin' genius, because Paramount had to write him a $2.8 billion check, and he doesn't have to own Warner Brothers.
Right,
a company which has killed
fee.
Every other company that it's ever been merged with.
Yes. Because it was a fee if Warner Brothers Discovery backed out of the Netflix deal.
If they went with another suitor. Like if they were just like, forget it, we don't want to be acquired, I think it might have been differently. But because they decided to go with the Paramount deal, they had to cut a check, and Paramount had agreed to cover that check. Right. So they literally did the next day. Netflix like, we're out, and David Ellison's like, here's some money. Mm-hmm. And so not only did they get $2.8 billion of just free cash, they also don't have to own Warner Brothers. And not only that, one of their rivals does have to own it and spend a gobsmacking amount of money for that privilege and deal with all the headaches that come with owning CNN, right? Political headaches and stuff. I feel like Ted Sarandos, absolute complete genius. And also, I don't remember specifically what you said, but I believe we were both right in that there are at some point only going to be like 4 streaming services.
They are combining.
By the way, I don't think Paramount Plus and HBO Max are going to be either of the streaming services that will be left. Just to remind our listeners, Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and Apple TV. Those are the only ones that are going to exist maybe 5 years from now. And again, Amazon Prime and Apple TV, the only reason that those two are going to exist is that Amazon and Apple have all the money.
It does feel like this merger, especially with the HBO Max, like pulling that into Paramount, feels like a death note for HBO, which... Max,
absolutely.
The Pit is pretty successful on HBO Max right now, and it is a good show. I've seen some episodes and I do enjoy it. But like other than that, HBO does not feel like the premier streaming service it once was, and it feels like if it's merging with Paramount Plus, maybe not long.
Yeah, it's not going to be great. And if they're smart, they'll keep it as HBO Max and just put all the Paramount Plus content. But I don't think that's what's going to happen, and that's super unfortunate. Can we say one more streaming thing, just to make sure our listeners? The F1 season starts today, actually. Practice is today for the Australian Grand Prix. Also, that means that you can watch them for free on Apple TV. Also, this is insane, but Netflix put the entire 8th season of Drive to Survive on Apple TV, the streaming service. It's all available, and they do it differently because they just drop the whole season at once. You can watch the whole thing for free on Apple TV. Well, I mean, you have to have Apple TV, but you don't have to sign up for Netflix separately. Right. And in exchange, the Canadian Grand Prix, which, spoiler alert, I think I'm going to, will be streaming on Netflix. Apple gave them that.
That's an interesting partnerships there for Apple and Netflix. And I will just say, I mentioned a show last week, Knife Edge, which I didn't know was an Apple TV Plus show, but our friend Nate told me about. Hooked on this now. Absolutely hooked. This is an excellent show. It's about restaurants trying to achieve Michelin star status. And it is a wonderful show. Just throwing that out there. If you like Chef's Table or similar shows like that, this is a show to watch, and it's an Apple TV Plus show.
But that is like it's a real show, right? Like
it's nonfiction.
It's like documentary
style.
Okay,
yeah,
great,
excellent though. I love the host. It's great.
It's not like The Bear, is what I'm saying.
No, not like The Bear. No, this is like real people, real show. There was a court case in the Supreme Court. There was an AI generated artist, Stephen Thaler, a computer scientist, and he was trying to have AI generated art copyrighted, and the Supreme Court declined to review his appeal. And so as of right now, you cannot copyright AI-generated art, which I feel like makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think there's going to be some interesting questions, because then what qualifies it? Like if I use Photoshop, if I use the denoise feature that Adobe considers AI, like I don't know. I didn't read this. I just literally, I didn't even see it in the rundown. I'm totally forming these thoughts on the fly.
Yeah.
I just think it's not a clear-cut thing as to say AI generated, because we haven't even established what that means.
This was one of like the submissions,
sure,
which is like very clearly 100% AI generated art. I wouldn't even say this is like great, but anyway, like,
and man, art is subjective.
Sure. But yeah, that is an interesting question that we don't have to deal with personally. But
we don't have time on this podcast, because this is not AI generated. We're here for real.
We're here with flesh and blood for real. All right, last thing before we get to personal tech, there was an agreement landed between Epic Games and Google about app marketplaces, and Tim Sweeney signed an agreement basically till 2032 that he can't be complaining about how Google runs its app store because of whatever. However, Google has now structured the app marketplaces, Tim Sweeney, and payments and all that. So Epic Games and Google, they're good. We'll see how Epic Games and Apple continue to go, but yeah.
I think that's hilarious.
I thought it was pretty hilarious too.
They had to, I mean, how much
you
money does
complain.
it take to him to be quiet?
Cannot complain. All right, personal tech. They sponsored this episode, but this had nothing to do with that.
I did not know. I
You
never
have no
know.
idea.
I literally never know what's
Jason
happening.
has no idea who sponsors the show until I literally say it out of my mouth.
That's actually 100% true.
It is 100% true.
So when I suggest things, I just suggest things. But I've been using Claude for a week, and I tried using it for everything. I don't remember how you described them, but you talked about the different yeah, and so I have a new theory about them. I think you're probably generally right, but I'm going to refine the way I think of them, because I have been pretty ChatGPT is still my default, because I've been using it for so long that it's nice to simply be able to say, can I eat this thing? And it knows everything else, and why it knows why and it knows why I'm asking. And anyway, so that's still, and also the Mac app is actually great. So there's that. Gemini I use for some things. But I started using Claude for everything. I will say Claude does a lot of really good things. Also, I have no idea how to use it, because sometimes I will say, write this thing for me, and it will create a side window where it just puts a bunch of text. And sometimes it will inline start making like code with those words in it. And then sometimes it will do something that I don't understand, and then it will say, do you want to open this in Ulysses? Which is amazing, because that's what I used to write in, and it just puts it in Ulysses. But I can ask it the exact same prompt and not know which of those things it's going to do. And then almost always I get done and it's like, you should have used Cowork for this. And I'm like, hang on, wait, what? And so I do feel a little bit like condescended to, like and so Claude, although the output that it's been giving me, fantastic. Now, to be clear, you use it for slightly different purposes. You're like using it to construct and build different things. So like, I'm just trying to test like for what I use ChatGPT for, which is like research, workshopping headlines, reviewing what I've written, sometimes giving me ideas, analyzing a bunch of data. And then I did have it actually generate some, not stuff I published, but I actually was like, I want to know what does your output feel like? So have it write some stuff. So Claude definitely feels like the smartest kid in the class that knows he's the smartest kid in the class. And it's really important that everyone else know that he's the smartest kid in the class. Totally. That's Claude. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
That's definitely Claude. ChatGPT is like the kid who just everyone really likes and does a pretty good job and gets like a 3.5 to 4 point, but like doesn't care that much, but will just hang out with you and do fun stuff. Gemini is like your smarter friend, but doesn't really want to talk about it. Like, I think Gemini is smarter than ChatGPT in some cases. Sure. Anthropic, for example, Claude, for example, again, they sponsored this, but they don't get to tell me what to say. I asked it, summarize the MacBook Neo that Apple announced today. And it summarized it. And it literally made everything up. It had no idea the MacBook Neo was a real thing. And it gave me all this stuff, and I'm like, none of that information is true. Actually, it got the price right. That's the only thing it got correct was the price. And it's like, you're right, I don't have this up in my world knowledge. I'm like, well, could you search for it? It's like, yes, I can do that. Do you want me to? I'm like,
yeah, that's the idea.
And so, but then at first, it argued with me for a couple of exchanges about like whether this thing was a real product that exists in the world. And I was like, how about you go off and look it up? Because I already know it's real. By the way, I also tested one other. I tested Grok.
Really?
Grok is like your crazy friend that is way smarter than you think, but you just have to get them to sit down long enough to actually have a conversation because they're very ADD, very busy drinking, very like come to class all the time, and they definitely don't want the teacher to know how smart they are. Like that's Grok. Grok actually does a really good job at some stuff, but it feels like absolute chaos using it. To the extent that when you type into the Grok interface, it's like trying to autocomplete and show you suggested responses or like links to the internet at the same time. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening here, but if you can get past it and type stuff into Grok, it's surprisingly good.
Interesting. I've not done that yet. I've not tried Grok for anything. I just wanted to say this was my original post. I said Gemini is like the eager assistant that's done a lot of research on you but doesn't know you yet. Claude is your good friend that's really smart. You go to for the tough questions, but you're not super close. ChatGPT is like your best friend from high school, may or may not be able to help, has some habits that still annoy you 20 years later. I thought of you when I wrote that last part.
Awesome. I still have some habits that annoy you 20 years later. We haven't even known each other that long.
No, because you said ChatGPT keeps doing things even though you tell it not to.
That's 100% true. And I would say this is mostly correct, except for Claude is your really good friend who's actually so smart but wants to make sure you know, which does beg the question of how good of a friend really are they?
Which I will say, to your point, and again, they sponsored this episode, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to say where it failed. I was building a shortcut just yesterday trying to use an API with, I think it's Airbnb or Zillow, and it gave me the wrong stuff. And I told it like, hey, show me this. And Claude literally said, oh, I had that wrong earlier. Do this instead of that. So it's like, it is hyper confident, sometimes wrong, but hyper confident about it, but then admits when it's wrong.
Well, it was funny because, the article I had it actually generate for me to see like how would you I'd already written an article about Harrison Ford's speech at this SAG Awards, his lifetime achievement. I'm like, this is so good, mostly because the story about how he literally says, I was not an overnight success. I was a carpenter for 15 years. It took me that long before I was like, that's amazing. So I just fed it the transcript, and this is the test I did. I fed it to all of them, and I was like, what's a good headline from this? What's a good angle? What's a whatever? And I kept suggesting headlines to ChatGPT, which I have actually given all of my headlines that have done well in the past. So it has all that context. And then I did the thing where you can export all of your ChatGPT memory data, whatever, to Claude. So I'm like, you should know this. And I start suggesting, I'm like, well, that headline seems a little bit too audience focused. That headline, you shouldn't have to explain this. I'm like, dude, you don't know headlines. Like,
you don't know me.
What are you doing? It's like, well, this headline, it's like, it was like very, I am so much smarter than you. You should just do what I say. And finally I was like, listen, I've written a lot of headlines. Which of us do you think? I literally said, which of us do you think knows better? And it was
you said it.
And it said, that's probably true. Yours is probably better.
Wow. So I will say, I've been, for my YouTube process where I give my video transcript and I ask it for a title and description ideas, I have a few times given it to Claude, Gemini, and my custom GPT, my custom Gemini Gem and my custom GPT, and I still prefer the ChatGPT responses for my YouTube title, description, and tag ideas. I think they're better titles. The ones that I used for the MacBook Neo video were from ChatGPT with slight tweaks, and those still won out. So despite Gemini being Google, for some reason, it's still not as good at titles for YouTube videos. And Claude is not good either. But I'm still using them each for different things. I'll use Claude when I'm building shortcuts, API. Now I'm writing Apple scripts and I'm doing more automations on my Mac. And so I go to Claude for all of that, and it's better at that. I'll keep going to custom GPTs for my YouTube and summarization tasks. I'll do some of those in summarization. I do sometimes in Gemini. But I go to Gemini for like general search. Although Gemini, I don't know. Tell me if you experience this. I feel like it's the hardest just to get a link to the real actual thing you're talking about from Gemini. Like I'll ask it, tell me about this and get me a link. And it just doesn't give me links a lot.
Really? Because I did the same thing where I was like, okay, tell me everything. I said, comparing the Apple laptops today, how many of the prices compared to what existed before? You can tell what I was going for. And literally every single bullet point had a link at the end of it.
So I just said, okay, maybe I just need to say, give me a link more.
Maybe.
Because the other ones just get like the sources and like whatever's at the bottom of the ChatGPT responses and Claude. I feel like it's just more natural, gives me places to go outside of the AI.
I want to say one more thing about Claude, because this is what actually made me start testing it, was cowork. So I connected Asana, Slack, Gmail. I think that means it also has Google Docs or something like that, and Google Calendar. And I will just say to it, what do I need to prepare for today? And so it will go to my calendar, find things on my calendar. Then it will go into Slack. So basically it was like, you have this meeting at 11 a.m. and I found this draft of a flow for that meeting. You may want to review it, but it found it in Slack. It's like, so-and-so shared this with you. They're going to be in the meeting. You should review this. And by the way, I also found this other document that you were working on that's related to the thing that there's no link between them, but it just figured it out. Yeah. It's like, also don't forget that these 4 Asana tasks need to be done, and one of them requires your review. And I went into your Slack and I found the conversation and I've summarized it here. I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And then it's like, here's your to-do list for this thing. Have any updates or blockers ready to share with the team? The meeting is only 15 minutes, so you're only going to have time for this, and this. So keep it tight. For this other thing, come ready to give feedback on this new material from this person. There's a 2-hour block, and then it's amazing.
See, that the cowork thing is.
I got to be honest, that. I mean, maybe if I only use it now, I connected a connected version of it. I don't know if I would give it free rein to everything I have, like Gmail. I gave it one Google Calendar and one Gmail account that I was like, YOLO, you can have your way with this. I don't care.
But it's still like cowork is still boxed into what you connect it to, as opposed to something like OpenClaw, which is just running in the background.
But you can connect it to some pretty useful things: Asana, Slack, Google Calendar, Gmail.
And you can use custom MCPs to connect Claude Cowork to more things. But those are made by not Anthropic, and so those could be risky.
Also, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to do that.
They're community-made MCP servers. So, like Bear, there's not a direct connector for Claude Cowork and Bear Notes, which I don't have time to get into it. But anyway, there's an MCP that you can install to Claude Cowork where it can see your Bear Notes and database, but it's made by some random person. It is not made by Anthropic.
So it might also be sending all your Bear Notes somewhere else.
And I did the thing, Jason. I literally exported all 4,000 of my Bear Notes to Markdown files. I downloaded Obsidian. I told Claude Cowork, create a folder structure that matches my Bear Notes exactly, and it did it. It actually created all the folders that matched my Bear Note tags, even the subfolders, put all my Markdown notes in the proper place. So I opened Obsidian, and my entire Bear Notes history was in Obsidian. I looked at it for 5 seconds. I said, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do it because Obsidian, I just don't like the UI. I can't do it.
Yeah,
I can't do the UI.
I don't. That's the only thing about Obsidian I don't understand is I feel like you have to be so motivated to whatever possible benefit there is, because every time I've tried, I'm like, no.
I still have it installed. Like, I'll open it right now. I looked at that app, and someone said you can download different themes. You can even install like third-party themes for Obsidian. I'm looking at these icons just in the tiny little left sidebar. I'm like, no.
Yeah,
I'm not doing this.
It's like going to Mars would be cool, but one, I'm not going to become an astronaut, and I don't want to get on a ship for 18 months. Like, it's never going to happen.
No. So I will wait for a first-party Bear connector or something else. But I will say, spoiler, my other co-host on my other show, he might be switching his entire email provider because of Claude Cowork, because he wants to use it.
Because he wants to use it. I thought because it like ruined something. I can't wait to listen to that.
No, because it has the direct Gmail connector, but for other mail providers it doesn't. So like I use Fastmail, there is an MCP server for it that some random person made, but it's not official and it's not first party. So I don't want to give some random MCP my Fastmail account.
So if I switched my thing from Fastmail back to Gmail, which I used to have it at Gmail, I could use Cowork for that.
Yes. And that tempted David Sparks enough where he might be doing that right now. As we speak.
But I was so painful moving one time.
That's what I'm saying. But like the benefit, like you were saying, that benefit of just being able to look everywhere, because you can connect Notion, Slack, Gmail, Apple Notes, Asana. You connect everything.
But I mean, okay, but here's the thing. I mean, I think Superhuman's going to get there. I'm not going to need Claude Cowork because I can already say to Superhuman, basically, like I asked.
But that's just your email. That's just your email. It's not like it can look into Asana.
No, but why can't it? Like, is what I'm saying. Claude Cowork can, but how long will it be before Grammarly basically or Superhuman just is like, yeah, connect your Gmail.
I don't know. See, he's beginning to believe.
It's going to happen.
He's beginning to believe.
I would trust Superhuman more than I would trust some random MCP.
Well, yeah, for sure. Anyway, Claude, they were a sponsor, but they also been doing some cool things. But anyway, all right, we're going to go record a bonus episode. Jason's going to try and convince someone in his family to buy the MacBook Neo. So we're going to talk about that. If you want to listen to our bonus episode, get an ad-free version of this, get our pre-show, which we had a good pre-show today. I shared some deep feelings I have about Apple events. And so if you want to listen to the pre-show, you can listen to the unedited version, which is also ad-free. You can go to join.primarytech.fm and listen to that. You can also support directly in Apple Podcasts. Either way, you get all the stuff. And we'd love and appreciate a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Let us know, do you like the MacBook Neo name or not? That can be your review. And you can also watch us on YouTube. All the links are down in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.